This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, so this is really the main part of the subject that we're going to speak about. Until now it was all background, but now we're going to get to the crux of the issue. So we have this Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid, and he left a tzava. He left the last will and testament. And in the tzava are some rather unusual admonitions. For example, I brought here some of the more famous ones and some of the ones that we're going to discuss. So in Yehuda Hachasid's tzava, it says, "Lo yelech adam al kever echad shnei pamim b'yom echad." A person should not go to one grave twice in one day. Once you went to a grave, you can't go back there that day. I have one more thing I want to daven for. Sorry, tomorrow. El yivakesh korat soinoi. You ask whatever you need. V'lo yashav ad lamachar. And don't return until tomorrow.
Is it appropriate to daven at a kever?
Is it appropriate to daven at a kever? So it depends who you're davening to. If you're davening to God,
okay,
that's one thing. If you're davening to the person who lays there, that's questionable.
Theoretically, the person is an intercessor.
Yeah, so right. So that's there's a very big discussion in halach about it, whether it's permitted to daven that the person be an intermediary between you and the Almighty. According to the pure halacha, you're not allowed to do that.
Okay.
There is a Hasidish minhag that is okay. So if you are Hasidish, the full deal, everything, then good. You could do that too.
But people have the phrase should be.
That's not today. That's not the subject. Let's okay. We have to continue the subject. But be it as it may, it says do not go to one kever twice in one day. Lo yivne adam bayis al karka shalei omav b'nim ha'olam. You cannot build real estate on virgin land. Do not build a house on land that nobody ever lived on. Vim hu eino roitzel hanichai panis. So what he said, I bought the land. What am I supposed to do? If you don't want to leave it empty, you're not to live there for 1 year. You're not to live in a house that nobody ever lived in that spot, unless you let somebody else live there the first year.
How is he allowed to live there?
That's his problem. But you're not allowed to live in a place where nobody ever lived on that land. You could get a guy. We're going to see the Chassam Sofer has a tshuva. It says you need a gever to live there. So you could bring in a chicken. Chicken is called a gever. Have the chicken do his thing over there. Okay, this is what it says in the Tzava Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid. Another one. This one everybody knows about. Lo yistoim adam chaloin oy pesach legamri. You're not allowed to completely close up a window or a door. Shelo yaziko hashedim. You don't want the shadim to harm you. Ki darkan lotzoisbay. Because that's how else do shadim get out of the house? They need the door. You're going to close the door, they're stuck inside. They're stuck inside, they're going to go after you. Eloyin koiv by nekav. You make a hole over there. That's very well known. Even the contractors know this halacha. I got a phone call from an Irish contractor who wanted to know the following shaila. He wants to close up a window, but the thing is, they're building an extension behind it. So they're going to close up a window. There's going to be a doorway. Or is he allowed to close up that window, or does he have to make a hole? It's taka, good to shaila. You need an Irish cup to come up with that shaila. So I asked Big Paiskim. It's a very big shaila. But this is very well known, and this people are zahirin. Okay, next one. Lo yisa adam es bas achiv. A person should not marry his brother's daughter, or bas achoisai, or his sister's daughter. Don't marry your niece. See, nowadays most people don't marry their niece. But we're going to see the problem with that is you're allowed to. Not only you're allowed to, the Gemara says it's a big mitzvah too.
Well, marry your niece?
You have a cousin who?
Once an uncle married his niece.
My cousin did that too.
So we have two people in this share. I'm not saying where it is because I don't want to disclose the location. But in our share here, we have two people who their uncle married their niece. What do you know? Ashkenazi?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And Sephardi. There you go. Lo yisa adam isha sheshma kashem imai. A person cannot marry a woman. Her name is the same as one's mother's name.
Why?
Oy shmai kashem chamiv. A woman cannot marry a man with the same name as her father. V'im nasa, and if you did, in other words, you can't get married if somebody's mother's name is Rachel or Leah, you can't marry Rachel or Leah.
Why?
Or if Leah wants to marry Yaakov, if her father is Yaakov, she can't marry him. V'im nasa, and if she does, Yeshana Shem Ha'echad, they have to change one of their names. Ula yesh tikva, maybe there will be hope.
But why?
V'la yisu shnei achim l'shtei achayos. Two brothers cannot marry two sisters. I happen to know two circumstances of two brothers that
I
married.
know that too.
You know that? I know two circumstances where that happened. Neither ended well.
3 brothers married 3 sisters.
We'll talk about that also.
And they're fine.
We'll talk about that as well.
Prohibition is against 2. 3's okay.
Lo yigaleach adam harosh v'lo yazaken b'rosh chodesh. You're not allowed to take a haircut or shave on Rosh Chodesh. V'chein lo yital hatzi parnayim b'rosh chodesh. You're not allowed to cut your nails on Rosh Chodesh. So why? I never heard this. Says it in the Gemara? No. It says in the Shulchan Aruch. Lo yikra ish mizares b'no Yehuda v'lo Shmuel. Nobody is allowed to call their son Yehuda or Shmuel. Now here it says, from my descendants. None of my descendants could call their children Yehuda or Shmuel. Now Yehuda was his name, and Shmuel was his father's name. It's like, it's like a retired number, L'havdil. His name was Yehuda, the father's name was Shmuel. You can't do it.
But is that from the father?
What?
Father's side or mother's side?
Mizare, from his descendants.
December.
Over here it says Mizar O, not Mizar E.
That's what it means. La Yadar Rav Behildburg. No one should be a rabbi in Hildburg. Ki lo yarach yamim. You won't live long there. There are other places like that even today. La Yadar Kayin Regensburg. No Kayhanim are allowed to live in Regensburg. V'lo Elazar. No Elazar is allowed to live in Regensburg. La Yadar Ish Be Avigsburg. La Yaduru Ish V'isha Be Ashtraich. Nobody should be married in Ashtraich. Unless you leave the country for a month every year. A woman who gives birth cannot eat for the first thing that she eats after giving birth a chicken. Okay? These are examples of something like 50 or so examples of the tzava Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid. Is it binding?
To be universal or just for his family?
Is this binding? Do Jewish people have to listen to this? Is it mamish aser? Did Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid write this? If he did, how could he? How does he have a right to put restrictions on people that are not found in the Gemara? More than that, some of these restrictions that are not found in the Gemara are against the Gemara. So that's a big question. I think the one that people are most familiar with are the ones when it comes to shidduchim. People are very familiar, 2 brothers should marry 2 sisters, and the most familiar is that not to marry a woman with the same name as your mother. That's pretty familiar. That everybody knows about, at least in the Ashkenazi world. Is it binding? What is the nature of Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid? Who did he mean this to be for? That is going to occupy us for the next number of shiurim. Today, Rabbi said, let's examine a few Gemaras and the opinion of the Noda Yehuda. The Gemara says in Yavamas. It's also in Samach Beis and Beis going on to Samach Gimel and Aleph. Also Gemara in Sanhedrin, Ayin Vav and Beis. Ha'oyev es shcheinav, one who loves his neighbors. V'hamakarev es kroivav, one who brings close his relatives. V'hanoisei es bas achoisai, one who marries the daughter of his sister. V'hamalve sela la'ani b'shas dachgai, one who lends money to a poor man in his time of distress. Right? So 4 things. You love your neighbor, you bring your relatives close, you marry your niece, and you lend money to a poor man. Olav hakasav oimer os tikra v'Hashem yana. You'll call out and God will answer. V'yomer hineni, God will say, what's up? Whatever you want. Your wish is my command. So it seems from here that there are 4 things which are the greatest zechus you could do. Number 1, love your neighbor. Number 2, draw your relatives close. Number 4, lend money to a poor man. And number 3, marry your niece. It seems like the biggest mitzvah you could do in terms of family is to marry your niece. It's a Gemara in Sanhedrin as well. So how could Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid come along and say, you're not allowed to marry your niece? The Gemara says not only you're allowed to, you should. Not only should you, it's the biggest thing you could do. Another interesting Gemara in Barachas, Mem Daled Amar Aleph. Ki asa Rabbi Yitzchak Amar Ir Achas Hois Beretz Yisrael V'gufne Shema Shahayu Ba Shmoinim Zugos. There were 80 pairs of Achim Kohanim Nesul Shmoinim Zugos Achayois Kahanos. 80 bros, 80 brothers married 80 sisters in Gufnes in Eretz Yisrael, and the Rabbanim checked from Surah until Nerda, and they couldn't find, except for Ben Seder Rav Chisda, the doors of Rav Chisda to have a Nasivan L'Rami Bar Chama, U'Lamar Ukfa Bar Chama. That V'yafagav the Inu have a Kahanta, they were Kahanim, Inhu Loi have a Kahani. They were Kohanes, but Rami Bar Chama and Mar Ukva Bar Chama were not a Kohanim. So here we find, in the times of the Gemara, brothers married sisters. So what's Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid doing that you're not allowed to do it? My Rabbi say, we start with the Noda of Yehuda, and this should be our guiding light, not only in this issue, but in any issue in general. I would say the single greatest danger today in Judaism is people placing emphasis on the mystical and on inyanim and on zachin and on skulas, forsaking Shas and Poskim. And this is an issue that the Noda Yehuda deals with. And as we've learned many times, Noda Yehuda was a tremendous proponent of staunchly adhering to the meat and potatoes of Judaism, which is Shas and Poskim. This is the Tshuva, Noda Yehuda, Eben Ezer, Tinyana, Siman, Ayin Tes. This is a question. Im yesh lachosh l'tzavos Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid min l'mnaya litein espita leish asher shmoi kishem avi Abbas. Should you refrain from giving your daughter to someone whose name is the same as the father of the daughter? Says in Noda Yehuda Halayla Zeh, this is written l'chvayid ahuvi talmidi yedidi Reb David. Says Noda Yehuda, today, this evening, I got your letter, and you want to know about the shidduch that was discussed to your brother-in-law. The problem is that your brother-in-law is a ben Torah, and he's a meyuchas, but at the time of his illness, they changed his name to the name of the father of this Basula. So you have a nice girl. She came in, he asked her, what's your name? Yantish Prinsa. Okay, beautiful name. A very elegant name. Yantish Prinsa. The problem is, his name it used to be, let's say, Yisrael. And when he was sick, they called him Yaakov Yisrael. But the only thing is, he asked Yantish Prinsa, knew what's your father's name? My father's name is Yaakov Yisrael. That's a problem now. Because now this man, his name wasn't always Yaakov, his name used to be Yisrael. His name is now Yaakov Yisrael, the same as the father of the Basula. Says the Heilige Noda of Yehuda Ahuvi Talmidi Lulei Avoscha, if not for the love I have for you, I don't usually mingle in these issues. This is not a halachic shaila. There's no Gemara that talks about it. There's no poskim that talk about it. But my great love for you took me out of my regular gather. You should know. It should be engraved on your heart. Lezichroin haklal, to remember this rule hagadol. Please engrave, etch, sear onto your heart. She'ein l'chol chachamim she'achar ha-talmud rishus loymar David neged ha-talmud. No Torah sage after the seal of Bavli can say one word against the Bavli. Anyone who wants to contradict even one crown of the Yud, point of the Yud from Gemara, lo yachshav b'chlal chachmei Yisrael. He's no longer a rabbi. What if we find a rabbi that taka does contradict the Gemara? If you find an established Talmud Chacham, a God-fearing sage, who contradicts the Shas, bli safek shekasav b'sefer davar. If there's no question about his reputation in Torah and Yira, that he wrote in his sefer something that is soiser the Gemara, chayavim anu, l'mashkoinoi nafshin, we need to bend ourselves, l'taritz devarav, to answer him up, shaloi davar reik, shaloi diber rak l'shah. The only way to answer, in other words, if you find a legitimate Rishon who says something against Shas, then we're forced to bend ourselves into a pretzel and say that rabbi only meant it as a Hayrasha, or a specific family. The Divrei Talmud Heim Ala Klal. And the Gemara is talking about the Tzibur at large. Meaning, if the Gemara says you're allowed to do something, and a Rishon comes along, and it's an established Rishon, a Rishon that there's no question about his scholarship, and there's no question about his fear of God, then we are forced to say either this Rishon meant it as a Hayrasha, for a specific time, or he meant it for a specific family. Likewise, we find by Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid, B'tzava Shalai in his ethical law, Dvarim shekemat aser lanu l'shaimam, words that it's kemat aser to listen to. Ki Amar Shalisa Bas Achaisai. He said you can't marry your niece. V'Gemara Amru Shu Mitzvah. Hu Omer Shalisa Avnei Shtei Achayos. He said a father and a son cannot marry two sisters. You hear another thing he said. A father and a son cannot marry two sisters. For a papa benai nasu shtei banu shel Abba Surah. A papa and his kid, he married two sisters. Hu Omer Shalayisu Beis Achim Shtei Achayos. The Gemara we find Shmainim Zug Achim Kahan Nasu Shmainim Zug Achayos Kahanos. And the two daughters of Chizda married the daughters of Rami and Mar Ukva Bar Chami. And Kiyotzu Zevasavahi. V'im hayachasid mitzvah mitzav tzavazul chol Yisrael. If this chassid commanded all the Jewish people to listen to him, hareinu soisa derei Talmud. He's arguing on Shas. Very asur lanu kabel dvarav klal. We cannot believe a blessed thing he says. Says in Noda, Yehuda, no chacham after the seal of Shas can say one word against the Gemara, and if they do, we are forced to say they either meant it as a specific Hayrasha, or they only meant it for their family. So what are we going to say about Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid? Avla emes yara darkoi, truth be told, ki Hachasid lazar achav tzivu l'dorei doros. Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid only meant his descendants. Ki ra beruach hakodesh, he saw with his Holy Spirit that his family, if they ever marry two sisters, it ain't going to work. It happens to be, I know, a very chashuv Rosh Hashiva in the last 100 years, who his father and his uncle married two sisters. And his uncle died without children, and his father died very young, and this Rosh Hashiva Nebuch passed away without any children. Now, it doesn't mean you're not to do it. But I think they themselves said, so, but, the Noda says, no. Noda says, Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid only meant it for his descendants. Because he saw, Baruch HaKodesh, not you're not allowed to. He saw that anyone who does, it's not going to end well. So it's just a practical advice. In other words, let's say somebody had X-ray vision, and they saw that if somebody buys a Ford Taurus, you're not going to see mazel from that car. So they could tell their descendants, from now on, I don't care, even if Ford gets their act together, nobody should buy a Ford Taurus. But the Gemara doesn't say you know how to drive a Ford Taurus. Yeah, but the father could give advice. Same way the father could give advice. I don't recommend you become a loan shark. Yeah, but it doesn't say in the Gemara. The father has the right to say, look, I have experience in life, it's not a good idea. Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid Ruach HaKodesh, he saw that two brothers marrying two sisters, it doesn't end well. A niece that marries the uncle, Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid said, in his family it's not going to work. So therefore, uvazeh einoi soiser derei Talmud shehu al haklal. The Gemara is talking about to the tzibur derei Hachasid hi al haprat hachada. That's erstens. Va'oira mina, and I tell you further. Shebelav hachi b'sheilazu. Besides this, in this question sheshel tani ein chan chashash klal. There's no concern at all. Va'afilu zari shel Hachasid. Even the descendants of Yehuda Hachasid do not have to listen to it. Why? Va'amina trei time ilachia shel Hachasid diba rak al ikar shem ha'etzem hanitein b'shas leda. Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid was only talking about the name that they were given at birth. Oy shas hamila avaloi al shem shenizbarach l'shinei Hashem. But when a name was added to give a bracha for Shinei Hashem, that's not called your real name. What's the proof? Very interesting proof. Listen to this. Chada, that the Gemara in Psachim on Kuf Chesed Beis says, you're not to drink zugais. Who knows what it means you're not to drink zugais? For the free vacuum cleaner. Who knows what it means that you're not to drink zugais? By the way, you're going to have to come vacuum my house. But what does it mean you're not to drink zugais? You're not to drink an even number of cups. It's going to get the shadim too hyped up, and they're going to come and get involved. You're now to drink an even number of cups. So how do you do it Leil Pesach? Pesach is Leil Shimurim. That's why. But it's a Sugiyam Psachim. You're now to drink an even number of cups. So the Gemara says, what about
period of time?
At one Suda. So the Gemara asks, what about the Koshel Bracha? It says a Koshel Bracha, it's blessing. So if you needed to count to get you to an odd number, it could count to an odd number. If you needed not to count toward an even number, it won't count to an. So in other words, if you drank 4 and you want to drink Koshel Bracha, you're good. If you drank 3 and you want to drink Koshel Bracha, you're oichet get. Right? So either way, Koshel Bracha, a bracha is not going to harm you. It's only going to help you. So the Gemara says,
if you have a suit at a kosher bracha, you don't have to worry. Because one way or the other, it
right,
can be good.
Right. Al kain koshel bracha l'tor mitzaref l'ra'in mitzaref. Kain ani oimer Hashem hazeh shenizbarach by lebracha nitain ulebracha mitzaref. So too I say a name given lebracha is only going to help you, not going to harm you. Meaning, if this name Yaakov Yisrael is going to make you equal to the shver, no, we won't count it because it was given lebracha, not leklal. And if the shver's name was Yisrael and now you're Yaakov, so it's going to help you that it's different. It's just like drinking. Basically, names and cups are the same. The same way Koshel Bracha is only going to help you, not going to harm you. An added name is only going to help you, not going to harm you. It says in Noda Yehuda, Shem Hayim is Da'amin Le'isha Asher Shem Aviyah Kashem Ha'etzem Shaloi. Then you could use the Shem Shel Bracha and it's Mitzdaref L'Toiva. And now you have a new name. Avalim is Da'amin Le'isha Shem Aviyah Kashem Ha'chada Shaloi. Az Shem Zeh Shanitein L'Bracha Eino Mitzdaref L'Ra. And you could use it and it won't damage. So that's first of all. So even the descendants of Yehuda Hachasid don't have to worry that if the name which was added is going to be the same name as the shver, it's okay. Another thing. Probably Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid did not mean an added name. Because you can't say that Sava Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid is greater than Yevama L'Shak. What does this mean? Basically like this. Imagine the following scenario. A woman marries a man, his name is Yisrael. It's okay, her father's name is Yaakov Yisrael. The guy gets sick, and now they added Yaakov to the guy's name. So now what? Now she has to divorce him? She married a guy who was Tzugapas from her. All of a sudden he got ill, and now he has the same name as the Shver. Now what? Either he's going to have to divorce her, or he's going to have to worry about a sakana his whole life.
Oh, let the Shver change his name.
Isn't I heard part of the reason is that you come to a problem, keep it over A, you'll call your husband. Would it make it like if your father's still alive or not alive?
We'll get to all the loopholes.
Are Yaakov and Yisrael considered the same name?
No.
No.
No. So if one guy's Yaakov, the other one's Yisrael, that's okay. We're going to see really any discrepancy at all is, even if one is called Moshe and one is Moishi, it's also okay. If one is called Abraham and the other one is called Avi, it's okay. Any difference at all. But says the Noda Yehuda that would be a lack of Deracheh Darchei Nayam. The Torah would never put someone in a scenario where they got married b'shalom, and all of a sudden, in the middle of the marriage, they have to terminate the marriage because now the names are the same. It doesn't make sense. Ve'ein zeh darkei noyam, v'loy nisiv shalom. Havadai, the kavanah of Yehuda Hachasid is only the actual name given at birth and not another name. So far 3 things. Number 1, Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid only meant it for his descendants. Number 2, the added name is only, a name added lebracha is only going to help you, not going to harm you. Number 3, if the name was given later, it's not a problem because Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid only meant the name given at birth. Umilvad kozel, lefi michtavcha roitza chaysencha leheschatin imsurvim merabanan. This is talking about, based on your letter, it seems like your son-in-law or your brother-in-law, she wants to marry, or your daughter-in-law wants to marry a Talmid Chacham. Oh, she wants to marry a Talmid Chacham. Shomer mitzvahu. He is a God-fearing Jew. That itself is going to protect them. In other words, if the marriage is to a tzaddik, a Talmid Chacham, a Yarei Shamayim, then the mitzvah of marrying such a person will protect you from any mysterious harm that might be involved here. Says in Noda Yehuda, that's what people are worried about. People worry about, the guy has the same name as my shver. What about the fact that the guy can't learn a block Gemara? That people are not worried about. This is what people are worried about. The fact the guy's an oisfarf, that's fine. But he has the same name as the shver. That's what people are worried about, the silliest things. First, make sure the guy can learn a block Gemara, that he could open up a Chumash and read a Rashi. Make sure he has some fear of God, some midos tovos. Then, as a last resort, you worry about this zach if he has the same name as the shvar. Utmihani aroiv ha'olam shalas is bitam la'ama aretz hu pashet etzah. Most of the world to give their kid over to an Amma Aretz, that's okay. Ve'ein choishesh. And there's no chshash. Lihimana. V'hu neged divrei Chazal. And it's against the words of Chazal. Sha'amru, that Chazal say, Ki'ilu kaifta umanich lefnei ari. Chazal say that if you give your daughter to an Amma Aretz, it's as if you gave her to a lion. Uleschatein imtzur merabanan. But to marry her to a young Torah scholar, sheshmai kishmai, that he has the same name, heim shoilim, that's what they ask about. V'loi tehei Torah shlema shalanu kitzava ba'alma. They make it that our Torah is like a last will and testament. In other words, when it comes to the meat and potatoes, when it comes to Torah mitzvahs, that people don't care about. What do they care about? They care about whether the names match up. And therefore, says in Noda Yehuda, based on the fact that Yehuda Hachasid only meant it to his descendants, based on the fact that Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid would not count an added name because a name lebracha is only going to count to help you, not to hurt you. Number 3, Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid only meant that the name given at birth is what counts. And finally, it's a minor thing, and the benefit of marrying a Talmid Chacham will outweigh it. L'chein dati yigmar chaysencha shilach hazeh v'yasam azim shamayim. Says Noda Yehuda, I am your Rebbe who seeks out your welfare. And this is the famous klal of the Noda Yehuda. Number 1, you cannot argue on the Gemara. And if the Gemara says that this is permitted, no one is allowed to challenge that, no one's allowed to argue on that, and if they do, they are not mechach me'Yisrael. What are we going to do with Yehuda Hachasid? He said it for his family. He never spoke about a name that was added as a blessing. He never spoke about an added name b'chlal, only a name given at birth. And furthermore, it's a minor thing, and the general benefit of marrying a Talmid Chacham should outweigh it. Comes Rabbi Ovadia Yosef in the Shas Tshuvas Yabia Omer, Chelek Beis Siman Zayin, Udvarav Chayim V'Kayam. The words of Noda Yehuda, they should live and endure. In other words, attaboy. Right? In other words, he gives his full endorsement to the words of the Noda Yehuda that this is a proper hashkafa, that the ultimate word on anything is Shas and Poskim. Nobody could come along and change it, and if they do, we have to bend ourselves to try to explain what they were referring to. Okay, my Rabbi, we'll hold it over here for this segment.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.